2011, 2 years before the CNN show, CBD exerts anti-convulsant effects in animal models of temporal lobe and partial seizures. They create animal models of diseases. My apologies to animal rights activists, which I identify with as well. Okay, CBD's anti-cancer effects. This is from a study done by the California Pacific Medical Center, published in 2010. The actual title of the abstract, Pathways Mediating the Effects of CBD on the Reduction of Breast Cancer Cell Proliferation, Invasion, and Metastasis. This research not only identified that CBD as a single molecule had these effects, anti-metastatic and so forth, these anti-cancer effects, but they identified one of the channels through which CBD exerted these effects, and that was by changing the gene expression of a particular gene called the ID1 gene that gets turned on inappropriately. It's supposed to be silent after you're born. In the womb, it's active and it's associated with creating new cells. It's as you need, that needs to happen in the womb. Afterwards, it's supposed to turn off and stay off. But for whatever reasons, if it gets turned on inappropriately, that's associated with several different kinds of aggressive cancer, not just breast cancer, about a dozen different cancers. And they found that CBD will change the expression of this gene and will silence it when it's not supposed to be speaking. That's one of the things that, and vitamin D does this as well. This is a image from the California Pacific Medical Center. You see on the this side, it's your left, excuse me. You see the blotches. This is breast cancer. This is human cell lines. This is breast cancer cells that they were experimenting with on Petri dish. You see the blotches are the breast cancer before the CBD is applied. And then the CBD is administered, and you see this, the breast cancer cells become less viable. Now, this is only cell line research. We can't necessarily assume that it will translate into a human subject, but anecdotally we hear it is. So, CBD and diabetes. This is a really significant area because metabolic diseases are a huge issue and becoming increasingly so because of poor diet and Western lifestyle. And this is from a study in Israel. CBD lowers incidence of diabetes in non-obese diabetic mice. Next one. CBD as an antipsychotic. Also work done in Brazil quite extensively in this. CBD as an antipsychotic drug. And there has actually been a clinical trial that was performed in Germany using CBD for schizophrenics. And the conclusion was it was as effective as the conventional medicines without any of the bad side effects, of which there is many. And this research is now going on at Yale University. They're doing another trial with single molecule CBD, actual trial on people for looking at as an antipsychotic drug, which has a lot of potential. Okay, CBD as an antibacterial agent. Oh, we sort of missed something here, but this is actually published by the American Chemical Society's magazine, a study done in 2008, which looked at the different cannabinoids, not just CBD, but THC and CBG, and you might even be familiar with some of these initials. But it turns out they have very powerful antibacterial properties. And this is quite significant given that the World Health Organization has identified the antibiotic-resistant bacterial diseases as one of the looming, major health crises of the century. Because of the overuse of antibiotics, they don't work anymore. And CBD has been shown to actually put the kibosh on MRSA, the antibiotic-resistant staph strain, was very effective at neutralizing that. So there's some great possibilities here as well that might be very important. And it's not something, again, my apologies for the way this ended up converting, but that's an area that's not as well appreciated, I think, within the medical marijuana community, the antibacterial properties of cannabinoids and how that might be really useful in some well-done topicals. And I know we do have topical cannabinoid preparations in medical marijuana states, but it's something that I think is just in its infancy, and there's really a lot of potential there. And CBD in particular is much more it goes to the skin much easier than THC, it turns out. So it would be particularly appropriate for topical applications. Okay, this was, I'll just read, this is from the British Journal of Pharmacology, 2010. I'll just read the abstract. Acute administration of CBD in vivo in a live animal suppresses ischemia-induced cardiac arrhythmias and reduces infarct size when given at reperfusion. In plain English, what that means is after a stroke, a person's heart is going bonkers with arrhythmia, and CBD suppresses that and normalizes the heartbeat in a mouse that has a stroke induced, and also limits the size of the brain damage when you give the mouse the CBD either before or after inducing the stroke. There's a lot of potential here too, because I know some, there are actual scientists who are using CBD, I guess it would be illegally, you might have to say, that for irregular heartbeat. And they found it's the only thing that helps a irregular heartbeat that can't be, this is very prominent as you get older. Increasingly, there's higher incidence of arrhythmia and AFib and so forth. So in this area, CBD is showing a really interesting potential, not just with the mice, but with the people who are using it this way that we are hearing of. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, here's my favorite one, CBD and mad cow disease. This is from a French research study from the Journal of Neuroscience, again, a blue chip journal. Non-psychoactive CBD prevents prion accumulation and protects neurons against prion toxicity. And actually, I have a quote that, again, sort of got missing the way it got transferred here, but basically what it said is that in this experiment that they did, preclinical, and every phase of the prion development of this infectious brain disease, with Alzheimer's, you can't give it to somebody, but mad cow, you can transfer it to somebody. That's the difference here. They're both based on irregularly shaped proteins that are associated with the disease. Well, with CBD and the preclinical trials shows that at every phase of the prion infection, for which there's no known cure, it stopped the infection at that point. So, again, CBD and mad cow, what can you say? All right, CBD and THC as antioxidants. I got to watch the time here a little bit, but because I wanted to make sure we have some time for questions. This was from the study I referred to that became the basis of the patent. And in the patent application, or in the patent documentation, it states cannabinoids, meaning CBD and THC, both of them, not just CBD, have been found to have antioxidant properties and have found to have particular applications as neuroprotectants, for example, in limiting neurological damage following ischemic insults such as stroke and trauma, or in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and HIV dementia. So that's the U.S. government's position on CBD and THC. We don't hear about that one as much, but last abstract, and I just cite this one because it makes a very important point that Project CBD emphasizes very strongly. We're not into single molecule CBD as an optimal therapeutic modality. We think the combination, the whole plant, is really most important and the most effective generally, although the single molecule will have its relatively minor place given the pantheon of possibilities and with cannabis therapeutics. But here's an experiment by the same, the California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco that did that breast cancer research. They also done some groundbreaking science research on glioblastoma, brain cancer. And I believe, incidentally, a real treat if you're here tomorrow, that Cristina Sanchez from Spain, a scientist from Spain, who first discovered that THC had these anti-tumoral, anti-cancer properties from her research. It was an accidental discovery. That it is actually here as part of the expo, which is, if you can catch Cristina Sanchez, she'll talk about what the sort of sister organization on the other side of the Atlantic, the Spanish, were doing. But this is what they were doing in the U.S. And they found that when they gave, well, the abstract title, CBD enhances the inhibitory effects of THC on human glioblastoma cell proliferation and survival. So CBD makes THC a more effective anti-cancer agent with respect to this type of glioblastoma. CBD makes THC more effective. When they test CBD alone, it also did something, not as effectively in this type of cancer as THC. But when you put them together, it was more than either of them alone. And it underscores a very important aspect of cannabis therapeutics, which is not the pharmaceutical orientation, but the whole plant orientation. The synergy, whether it's CBD and THC or all the other components of the plant, is really, really crucial, and we shouldn't lose sight of it as we move forward, where there's going to be a lot of pressures to pharmaceuticalize the plant, to take one compound at a time, again, which will have its place and which could do some good things, but I feel we feel are limited for various reasons. Okay, so let's talk a little bit practically speaking, because you're now in Hawaii. You'll have access soon from dispensaries to different products. Sooner or later, a lot of these different oils and things. So what do you do with them? Well, I think it's important to always look for products that have both CBD and THC together, and because they do work synergistically. That was just one example I showed. There's many other scientific examples I could have shown. We find that CBD actually potentiates THC's effectiveness as a painkiller and vice versa. They both work as painkillers to some degree, isolated, but when they're together, much more effective. And there's extensive clinical documentation for this from scientific and medical research done outside the United States. In over 20 countries, there is a CBD-rich sublingual spray called Sativex, about 50-50 one-to-one relationship. CBD and THC been extensively tested for neuropathic pain, which opiates don't do a good job with. And this one-to-one ratio of CBD and THC, according to extensive clinical trials, is effective. So something, the FDA doesn't recognize it, but if you're dealing with that issue, or if you know somebody, when dispensaries making these things available, keep in mind that we know that a one-to-one ratio has been shown clinically to be effective. But that ratio, if you take, depending a certain amount, you can get high from it. And that might not be somebody's liking. So, okay, to move through this quickly. CBD not only brings out, amplifies THC's therapeutic attributes with respect to a wide range of conditions. It actually, with CBD now as part of the picture, it broadens the scope of broadens the therapeutic framework. There's conditions now that you can consider treating with cannabis that you wouldn't think of cannabis before without the CBD, particularly metabolic disorders, liver disorders, things like obesity, diabetes, these kinds of diseases. THC is not the first thing that comes to mind as something that, even according to preclinical research, it's not something that you'd suggest for that. But with the CBD, these conditions come to the forefront. Okay, what else we have? CBD. How do CBD and THC interact? This is very interesting. I don't know if it's worth explaining all the science, but when you have CBD and THC together, depending how much of each is in a compound or in a strain, it will determine how psychoactive, or will be a major factor in determining how psychoactive that product or strain is. There is ways, as I said, CBD is not psychoactive like THC, and now people have, at least in California, and eventually, and pretty soon I would think in Hawaii, you will have the option of using medical marijuana products that really won't get you high. They may not necessarily be the best products to use for your condition, but if you don't like getting high, that's a great option. For some people, that's a real barrier. The THC kind of spooks people. It makes them more anxious and paranoid, while other people, it seems to relax them. It has this funny kind of duality. And we should just respect people are different. Whatever the reasons, that's the way it is. But, well, just to follow the thread here, because I want to impart, I think, the main insight we've learned at Project CBD from our vantage point, dealing a lot with doctors and scientists in particular, but also with patients and dispensaries